Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, this is Sporting Logically, and today is Trade Machine Tuesday, a weekly series where I take 3 guys that are subject to trade rumors and use the ESPN trade machine to find possible destinations for them. Before we get started, I wanted to say a huge thank you for the success of last week's episode. You guys were awesome in the comment section with suggestions and discussions, and it really made the series come alive and make me that much more excited for future episodes. So again, just thank you guys for that. One quick note, there were a lot of requests for any number of Raptors players after they were bounced from the playoffs last week, so I decided to leave that whole situation for a separate video in the future where I look at a bunch of routes they could go with trades to change up their team. So be on the lookout for that. Anyways, let's get started. First up is Kawhi Leonard. This was a highly requested player, obviously, with how strange the situation in San Antonio has been, but there are 2 things to keep in mind first. 1, teams trading for Leonard need to be confident that he will re-sign in 2019, so that limits realistic options to teams in bigger markets, which is reportedly one of the reasons he wants to leave the Spurs. Second, the Spurs really don't want to trade him, so if they do pull the trigger, Kawhi won't come cheap. So if you think the first trade is a bit steep in terms of compensation, that's what my thinking is there. The first deal is Leonard to the 76ers, for Dario Saric, Markelle Fultz, Jared Bayless to make the contract numbers work, plus either the Lakers' 2018 first-round pick via the Sixers, assuming that's the way the lottery ping-pong balls fall tonight, or whichever player the Sixers select with that pick, depending on the timing of the deal. Let's start with the Sixers' perspective. They likely wouldn't make this trade until after free agency is finished, as they're reportedly going to be going after some big fish such as LeBron James and Paul George this summer, which would make Philly that much more desirable of a destination for Leonard. The trade would have to be altered if they did sign a big free agent, however, because they would already have had to have traded Bayless's contract to create max cap space. With that said, assuming they don't get either of those guys, they can rest easy knowing they're trading for a top 5 player in the league when healthy. Leonard covers up a lot of holes that were exposed in their roster in this year's playoffs against the Celtics, specifically a lack of perimeter offensive creation outside of Ben Simmons and a lack of wings with the defensive ability to check skilled offensive perimeter players. There is obviously the concern of Leonard's quad injury not fully healing, and this is a lot to give up with that kind of risk involved. Not to mention, it isn't necessarily a guarantee that he stays in 2019. But if they really do want to get Kawhi, given the assets they have, something close to this is likely what it would cost to get San Antonio to budge. The only other piece, if you want to call him that Philly would throw in is Robert Covington. But he makes $16 million next season and looked awful for most of the playoffs, so I doubt the Spurs would even want him. Now for the Spurs side of things. It is never a good situation when you're trading away a top 5 player, but they get a great haul for a guy that barely played for them this past season. Saric would be excellent in San Antonio given their reputation for developing European players, and Fultz's ability to play either backcourt position wouldn't stunt the growth of young DeJounte Murray, assuming he's healthy. Bayless's deal coming off in 2019 gives them $9 million extra to work with that summer, and that extra pick, or the player selected with it, would only provide them with even more young talent. If they do decide to trade Leonard, this is likely the best deal they're going to find if Philly's interested. Moving on, let's just say Philadelphia's offseason works out differently and they aren't in position to trade for Kawhi, or they just aren't interested at that steep of a price. In that scenario, a potential deal could be Kawhi to the Lakers for Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, Julius Randle in a sign and trade on a contract that makes the numbers work, and the Cavs' 2018 first-round pick via the Lakers. For the Lakers, they get a top 5 player when healthy, and it's all but guaranteed that he will want to play in LA and re-sign in 2019. Depending on their free agency success, they could roll out a lineup that includes Lonzo Ball, Kawhi Leonard, and either LeBron James or Paul George. They do have to give up the promising Ingram and Kuzma, while losing Randle would be tough as well, but with that lineup they would almost assuredly be in the upper tier of the Western Conference. There would be an adjustment period for sure, but if this is the offseason in which the Lakers are planning on taking some big swings to put themselves back in the contention conversation, this would be one of their better options. For the Spurs, they wouldn't get as good of a haul as they would from the Sixers, but again, this scenario is one in which the Philly trade isn't an option. They get 2 promising wings in Ingram and Kuzma to try and replace a lot of what Kawhi gave them, and their player development staff should do wonders with their games. The big potential issue here is how much they'd have to pay Randle, likely around $12 to $15 million a year, which depending on who you're asking is either a bargain or way too much to pay for the young forward. Either way, they get younger with some promising pieces and an extra late first-round pick this year with which to work some draft magic. A young semi-core of Murray, Ingram, Kuzma, Randall, and whoever they draft in addition to what they could get in a separate trade for LaMarcus Aldridge would be interesting moving forward given their reputation for developing players. The next player on the docket is Carmelo Anthony. Another highly requested player. Finding a trade for Anthony is even more difficult than just finding someone to take on his outsized salary of over $27 million next season. I didn't realize this until I did research for the video, but he still has the no trade clause in his contract that he had to waive to come to Oklahoma City in the first place. He is still on that same deal, and the no trade clause is non-consumable, meaning that Melo can still block any deal to a team he's not interested in playing for. This is a huge issue when trying to find a suitable deal for him, as the three most reported teams that he wanted to play for last summer were the Lakers, Cavs, and Rockets, before Oklahoma City came into the equation. The Lakers likely don't want to use their cap space on Melo unless they can send back Luol Deng's contract, which doesn't help the Thunder, so that isn't happening. LeBron is likely out of Cleveland, so it makes no sense for Melo to want to go there in that scenario, and even if he stays, there really isn't a deal with Cleveland that makes sense with their current contracts. That just leaves us with Houston. I don't see this deal as likely at all, simply because if the Rockets are going to make big changes this summer, I don't think that they would involve Melo. But here it goes anyway. The trade is Anthony to the Houston Rockets for Ryan Anderson and some contract filler. For Houston, they're buying low on a guy that just looked like a shell of himself for the Thunder. Many of the same issues he had in Oklahoma City would still exist in Houston, as he would be playing off the ball a ton and wouldn't see many, if any, isolations consistently to try and get any kind of rhythm going. But maybe playing with his buddy Chris Paul would help him reignite his game, and in a much more positive situation with the Rockets than what he just experienced in OKC, that could be all he needs to get his game back on track. All of this while only giving up a player in Anderson that is all but unplayable in the playoffs against their main competition in the West, the Warriors. If it doesn't work out, Melo was a free agent in 2019 anyway, 1 year earlier than Anderson. For OKC, any trade they can find for Melo would be a positive. They get back a guy in Anderson that could really provide some much needed spacing, though on a pretty expensive deal that is 1 year longer than Melo's. But if Paul George does in fact leave, they'll need all the spacing they can get for the Russell Westbrook Revenge Tour Part 2 that would surely follow, and Anderson can certainly provide that. Again, given Melo's contract situation and no trade clause, there aren't a ton of trade options out there that could actually happen. So if the Thunder get this opportunity, they would probably take it. Last up, we have Andrew Wiggins. I doubt either of these deals would actually happen for a few reasons, but I put them on here because I think that they actually make sense and they're pretty fun. First up is Wiggins to the New Orleans Pelicans and a sign and trade for DeMarcus Cousins. Let me just say, if DeMarcus Cousins was healthy, then the Pelicans would never consider this deal. But with him coming off a torn Achilles injury and the team having doubts about his fit, flipping him for a wing that they desperately need, even one as disappointing and overpaid as Wiggins has shown to be so far in his career, could be a good option. They get a guy that really could become a great wing defender if he puts it all together, something they clearly need based off the fact that Jrue Holiday was the primary defender on Kevin Durant in the playoffs this year, as well as someone with a good amount of offensive potential. Wiggins starts making $25 million a year next season, which is pretty steep, but also pretty close to what they'd have to pay Cousins to keep him around anyway. A five-man lineup of Holiday, E'Twaun Moore, Wiggins, Nikola Mirotic, and Anthony Davis would be one of the better starting groups in the West. Again, it's unlikely, but I find it really interesting. For the Timberwolves, if they get the same DeMarcus Cousins from before his injury, this is an absolute steal. A front court of the old boogie alongside Karl Anthony Towns would be devastating offensively, with each having the ability to stretch the floor and punish teams inside. There would be some challenges defensively, but that's already the case with the current version of the Wolves anyway. The team would need to find some help on the wings in free agency, but a four-man group of Jeff Teague, Jimmy Butler, Cousins, and Towns could really do some good things for them. Obviously, all of this is assuming Boogie comes back strong from the injury, and if he doesn't, this whole deal could look completely different a few years from now. But the team already has buyer's remorse from the Wiggins extension last offseason, so unloading him for the possibility that Cousins could return to form would be worth it. Another scenario for a Wiggins trade is one straight out of a time machine. This one was suggested in a comment, but I can't for the life of me find it again for some reason, so I apologize for not showing the comment on screen, but whoever suggested this, you know who you are. Anyway, the trade is Wiggins to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Kevin Love. To be clear, this is only in the event that LeBron James leaves Cleveland, in which case the whole roster will be subject to change. The Wolves get some much needed spacing and shooting from the 4 spot, and while just as with the previous trade, it doesn't help them much with their current defensive issues, they would likely be a much better offensive team. Love is already familiar with how to be the second or third option offensively, so there wouldn't be much of an adjustment period for him. This would also allow Karl-Anthony Towns to spend not so much time spacing the floor out of necessity and spend more time in the paint on offense where he is most effective. For the Cavs, this is just about getting a younger player with potential in the wake of James leaving. As much as Wiggins is looked down upon, he is still young and has the ability to become a very good player in this league. Having the opportunity to be a bigger part of the team with a rebuilding Cavs roster could be all he needs to unlock his game and take it to the next level. Even if that doesn't happen, he would be a nice complementary piece to whoever else the team is able to pick up in their complete roster overhaul that would likely ensue with LeBron leaving. To me, as unlikely as this trade is, it's actually a win-win scenario for both sides. And that is the end of Trade Machine Tuesday, and I thank you all very much for watching. As always, if you have suggestions for trades or players for future episodes, or some thoughts on the trades from this episode, I would love to discuss those things with you in the comments below. If you liked the video, then leaving a like rating is a great way to let me know, and if you'd like to see more videos just like this, then be sure to subscribe to Sporting Logically for more content every single week. Thanks again, and I will see you all next time.